Go to work. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this session of the Staton City Council for Monday, the 4th of February, Anno Domini 2019. Would you join me in a flag salute, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. It looks like everyone is here except Councilor Mullen, who is excused tonight. So we can go to announcements, which are any additions to the agenda that anyone has. Declarations of ex parte contact, conflict of interest, bias, etc. No?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I do have one declaration to make regarding resolution number 986. There was an inquiry that I made earlier today. The city manager answered my question. I plan on asking it tonight anyways, just for public advisory purposes. Outside of that, nothing.
Okay, thank you. All right, anything else? Okay. Presentation, comments from the public. Anything other than a presentation of a recycling award to the City of Staton by Republic Services? They have the floor if they're not ready for that. It looks like the librarian is going to accept the award. Is that right? Yeah. This is unexpected.
Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, my name is Reed Carlson. I'm the Marketing and Recycling Coordinator for Mid-Valley Garbage and Recycling Association. I came out here tonight to, like you were saying, award the City of Staton and the Staton Public Library for their 5-city contamination contest winnings. So a little bit about what the 5-city contamination contest was about. Last year during the DEQ Senate Bill 263 commitments, we decided that we were going to put on a contamination contest between the 5 most populated cities in Marion County. So we conducted a few audits. The audits were conducted in partner with Garden Services. Basically what we were looking for was any sort of contaminations, both old and new. And we found, based on these series of audits, that the City of Staton had the lowest contamination rates, which is really exciting and really impressive with how low it was. So you guys were in the single digits, whereas not really the worst city, but the most contaminated city was in the 20% range. So it's really impressive to see that coming from such a passionate community. So we decided to give the award to the public library of the winning city because they really represent the reuse and reuse part of recycling. This is often overlooked as such a powerful impact, and DEQ has made it their promise to promote these, and we've partnered with them to do so. So as the prize, it is a prize of $2,500 to this Staton Public Library.
Oh, look at that check.
Don't you touch that one. No wonder she's up there to grab that. Okay. Well, thank you very much. What is it possible to get? Let me ask. I'm going to ask some questions here. I'm curious about this. Don't leave. Thank you.
What was that?
So, our rate of non-recyclables was below 20%?
Correct. You guys were around 4 or 5%, if I'm not mistaken.
Whoa, that's pretty good.
Yeah. So, really impressive. So I got to sort some of it with Garden Services, which was exciting in itself. But
How other, without names, other places in the county, how high can it get? 20, 30, 40%?
well, on average, when we look at residential recycling, meaning the curbside, that averages around 10%. But when you get into some commercial, like multifamily, where you have the large dumpsters with a lot of different people putting their recycling in there, that can get up to around 20%, and that's that range. But residential can be as low as 2%, and it really depends on household to household.
Okay. And even with our multifamily housing apartments, contamination level stays pretty low.
Yeah, of the places that we audited.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, wonderful. It's a good thing. Thank you very much. Anyone
Yes.
else? Questions or thoughts? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. Okay, wonderful. Where's the librarian? Where'd she go? Oh, there she is.
Good job, Shannon.
Janet, you have any plans for that money? I mean, is there a chance for
Yes, we
a
do.
party or two or three?
Probably no party.
Probably not. Okay, all right, well, fine, good job. Okay, let's see, any other comments from the public this time? Any others? All right, let's go to the consent agenda then. January 22nd, City Council minutes. Folks, take a look at those and tell us what you want to do. Everyone's had a chance to look at those? Yes?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move to approve the minutes.
Okay.
I second that motion.
I've got a motion and a second to approve the Staton Community, what did I call those? Agendas, yeah, consent agenda. Thank you, as published. All right. No other concerns? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Hearing none, we'll declare that passed, and we'll move on into our agenda. We have some presentations this evening, so it looks like about a 15-minute meeting, but it's going to be longer. I've got a series of appointments to make to advisory boards, and some of them are new, and my pattern is to call those folks and just talk to them a little bit about what they've applied for and what they see their role as and what they think that group does. So that's going to take a little bit of time. Probably by next meeting I should have most of those. But tonight I'd like to reappoint Michael Jaeger, in German that'd be Jaeger, to the Public Safety Commission. And I would ask your approval of that, please.
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Could I get a second to that, please?
Seconded.
Thank you. Got a motion and a second to appoint Michael Jaeger to the Public Safety, reappoint him to the Public Safety Commission. Is there any discussion on that motion? And if not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Hear none. Approved 4-0, and Mike will be reappointed then. There are no public hearings tonight. There's no unfinished business. Well, there is, but it's just not tonight. New business is a transportation system plan update and a presentation by Mr. Fleischman, our city planner, and the city's consultant, Kittleson and Associates. So, Mr. Fleischman, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Our consultants from Kittleson and Associates will actually be making the presentation. My role is merely to introduce them and set the stage. The city last adopted its transportation system plan in 2004. We are probably a few years overdue in starting this project, but in April or the spring, sometime in the spring, we hired Kittleson and Associates to guide us through updating the transportation system plan. They have been hard at work We've got a citizen advisory committee and a public and a technical advisory committee that has now met twice. We've had a couple of citizen open houses, and we wanted to take this opportunity to provide a briefing to you as to the process, and have invited the Planning Commission, and we have 4 of the 5 members of the Planning Commission here this evening as well, since this will be appearing, once it is ready, this will be appearing before them as part of the adoption process. So with that, I'd like to introduce Susie Wright, who's a transportation engineer with Kittleson Associates, and she will guide you through this.
All right, thank you, Dan. Yes, Mr. Mayor, councilors and commissioners, thank you so much for having me here tonight. It is my pleasure to be here. It's been a real pleasure to date working with your staff on this update to your transportation system plan. And as Dan mentioned, it's been nice to see some friendly faces here. I think those that have been participating in our advisory committees include the Police Chief, Councilor Quigley, and Commissioner Carmichael, I believe. So if you have any issues with anything I present tonight, you can take it up with them tomorrow. But no, I think it's lovely to have a good bridge to our process on both at the Planning Commission and the City Council. Obviously, our goal is to go through this process and make sure that you have a transportation system plan that will really serve you into the future. So what I'm here to do tonight is to just give you an overview of the project and where we are at, just talk about the progress to date, get a little bit of feedback on some of the things that we are in the process of evaluating, and then give you a preview on next steps. And at about midway through my presentation, Brian Gravlin from Kittleson and Associates is here with me, is going to take you through some of the presentation as well. So some of the main goals of the project in updating the transportation system plan was to make sure that we are coming up with kind of more accurate projections for the future. The last transportation system plan, the projections were made coming off of a period of tremendous growth, and it really resulted in some pretty very high projections for growth that might have had a significant impact on the types of projects that are in the existing TSP. So one of our focus areas was to relook at the growth projections and make sure we felt like we were planning the city around kind of more reasonable growth assumptions, and taking into account economic conditions.
Ma'am?
Paying more attention. Yes, sir.
Excuse me, it may be just my poor old eyes, but is there a way to focus that a little bit better?
Yeah, let's see what we can do
It could
there.
be just me. I would apologize if it is.
I think it's the projector, unfortunately.
Maybe going, maybe if we go forward, will it readjust?
Time for a new projector.
Yeah.
Well, maybe you could just read all that, and I'll try to listen.
That's better.
That's a little better.
That's probably it. Okay, that's fine. Yeah.
It's our equipment, so.
Okay.
And I must say, the setup feels really dramatic. I hope the TSP doesn't feel as dramatic to you as it feels for me to be up at this podium with dark lights. I think this is a first for me. So part of our goal is revisiting the growth projections and really taking a harder look at the bike and pedestrian needs in the city, and kind of what's going to kind of meet the city's goals and objectives in that area. It was an area that wasn't very focused on in the previous TSP. And to make sure that the TSP is in alignment with other plans that have happened since then. A number of things have, additional planning has occurred since 2004. From a scheduling perspective, we are probably about 2/3 of the way through the process. We have done a plans and policy review that helps set the stage for us looking at the existing and future conditions and needs. We are kind of at the tail end of an alternatives analysis, and I'll be giving you some highlights tonight on some of the different alternatives that we're looking at and what we've heard from the public. From here, we're going to be moving forward to crafting the draft document, and we will be taking that to our advisory committees in March, and hopefully coming back to you all for your next briefing in March or April, kind of leading into the adoption process. So as part of the setting the stage for the project, we did a policy framework and code review. We took a look at what was current rules and regulations guiding planning at the state level, what were in some regional plans, and other city plans that have taken place since the last TSP update to make sure that this update is kind of comprehensive and taking into account other planning that has been done. We took that review and took a fresh look at the city's transportation goals. With those, developed some evaluation criteria that we could use to apply to our projects to help prioritize them or select a preferred alternative to make sure that the improvements that we're selecting are helping move the city in the right direction towards achieving your goals. I would say that the goals are not significantly different, but there was a little bit of massaging done to them to make sure that they were consistent with your comprehensive plan, as well as kind of the state of the practice for transportation system planning. Our assessment of existing and future conditions took a look at the motor vehicle system, the pedestrian system, the bicycle system, as well as transit. The existing facilities for sidewalks, for the pedestrian system, we were taking a look at where sidewalks exist, where you have gaps in the sidewalk network, which is shown in red on this map, considering both sides of the street, as well as looking at some of your existing and future trails. Our assessment of the bicycle network looked at different types of facilities as well. We looked at where there's bicycle lanes on the street, so a designated space for bikes, either in a bike lane or in a shoulder that's kind of adequate width for to bicycle in safely. We also looked at streets where it's based on this amount of traffic and low speeds, it's suitable to and safe for all ages to ride their bicycles in the street, and would consider that an appropriate shared facility. And we looked at some areas where the standards and traffic and volumes would suggest that we really do need bicyclists to be separated from cars, and those are on the streets that are shown in red, is where it doesn't exist, but we believe that a separate space should exist. We also took a look at the transit system, which Chariots does have a route that serves Staton, although it's mostly set up to help people access some social services in the county and not so much set up for commuting. But it does provide a vital service. We took a look at traffic operations. We analyzed 22 study intersections throughout town. And what we found is that all study intersections that we looked at were currently meeting applicable mobility standards, so meeting the city's level of service standard, and that there's adequate storage to handle left-turning vehicles where needed. As we looked at growth assumptions, as I mentioned, that was a kind of a key component of the plan update, was revisiting the growth rates that had been used in the past. And so the growth rates that are now being applied are an average population growth rate of just under 1% per year, and about 1.5% per year growth in jobs. We took those assumed growth assumptions of houses and jobs, and we looked at the city's zoning as well as buildable land inventory and applied that growth in different areas of town to see what might the traffic needs be in the future. So in total, those came out to about 900 additional trips in the PM peak hour as we look into the future. And what we found as we grew traffic into the future, we found that that added traffic was pretty well distributed in different areas of town, and that all study intersections were going to continue to meet the city's mobility standards. So that was a little bit of a different finding than the last TSP update, and as I'll speak to in a little bit, kind of resulted in us being able to revisit some of the facilities in the current TSP that were planned to be widened to 5 lanes and kind of back down some of those assumptions.
Ma'am, when would you like to take questions on these things? Your choice, your call. After you're done?
Staff, do you have any recommendations?
Whatever you're comfortable with.
Okay.
Go back
Okay.
a picture, please. That last one. No. Right there.
Yep.
The bottom of the page, all signalized intersections provide enough queuing storage lane. Can you explain that in a sort of simplified English, please?
Sure, no problem. So queuing, it's the storage area. So if you need to make a left turn, the queuing storage, so is the space available for you to kind of, we call it queuing, queue and wait your turn to turn left. So if there's a center turn lane where you're getting kind of out of the through traffic lane, there's usually a limited amount of storage in that lane unless you're on a 3-lane road with a center turn lane that kind of goes on forever. So sometimes that left turn space is constrained, and so that's what we refer to as the queuing storage length. Is there adequate length and storage for left turns to get into the lane?
Does it kind of mean traffic stacked up?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yep. Okay. So we also did a thorough safety assessment of crashes that have occurred over the last 5 years, looking at vehicle crashes as well as paying attention to pedestrian and bicycle crashes that involved bicycles and pedestrians. And what we found is that we did look at some state facilities which are outside of the city's jurisdiction, but still appropriate to look at within the city's TSP. Although one thing you'll notice is that one part of the interchange at all 3 of the interchanges that serve Staton have you showed up as high crash locations, many of which kind of have been on ODOT's radar, and there have been plans to address them. But we were looking at where we had opportunities to address things either within city's jurisdiction or what you could help advocate for with ODOT. We've had now 2 open houses. The first open house we hosted, we were soliciting feedback on needs, and we had a pretty good attended open house, both in person as well as an online event, so that folks could go online and really go through the same exercises that obtain the same information, do the same exercises that they were able to do in person. And the key feedback we got at that first open house was about kind of areas where people were interested in seeing the pedestrian system improved, not only with sidewalks but crosswalks, and other areas where they wanted us to know that they had safety concerns. So after we set kind of the baseline assessment, we got into defining alternatives. Brian, is this an area where you wanted to step in for a little bit? Brian's going to talk to you a little bit about the bicycle and pedestrian alternatives analysis.
All right, let me get the hang of this guy. Okay, yeah, like Susie mentioned, we as a project team looked at all of the different infrastructure in Staton through the lens of where might we need more bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure or improved bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. We looked at all of the different major roadways, so not looking at small little local roads, but more of your major collectors and arterials. And we looked at the areas that needed improvements. Areas that maybe there was no facility at, that there needed to be a facility at, given the flow of traffic, the speed, and the volume. Maybe areas that there was a facility at, but that maybe it needed to be improved. Sometimes there were sidewalks available at a certain location, but the sidewalks needed to be widened or separated from immediately on the roadway, or improved because they were cracked or not level or something along those lines. We got a lot of good feedback, as Susie mentioned, from the open house. So we got a lot of people telling us certain locations where there might need to be a crosswalk, or locations where they've experienced that there needs to be a sidewalk or needs to be a bike lane. What all of that analysis resulted in was the maps that you see. There's a pedestrian one here, and then I'll show a bike one after this. And we ranked the different areas of town in terms of which facilities really need to be improved the most. So you can see Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, and Tier 4 there, or hopefully you can. Hopefully it's not too grainy. The red is the highest priority, that's Tier 1, and the blue is the lowest priority, that's Tier 4. And you can see that the red locations are the ones that we see as really critical to improve on this map from a pedestrian point of view. You can see on Shaft Road and on Wilco over to the left, those are what we see as some of the more critical pedestrian improvements. And a lot of times that means putting in sidewalks, putting in crosswalks. We spell out the specific improvements necessary in the memo itself, but I won't dive into that here. From a bike point of view, you can see a lot of the same kind of thing. Red implies that that location is really important to improve. Blue means maybe it's a location that needs to be improved, but we can wait for a developer to develop there and they can take part of that responsibility, or maybe it doesn't need to be improved quite so immediately. You see some of those lines are dashed. The legend might not show very well, but the dashed lines mean that we need to implement signing and striping. Maybe instead of a separated facility, this is more of a route that we could sign or stencil in as a bicycle route that is a shared space. And with that, I'll turn it back to Susie to talk through some of our other intersection and project alternatives.
Yeah, just backing it up just for a second there on the bicycle map. The north-south dash lines are 3rd Avenue. So one of the elements of the TSP that is staying is the notion of not planning for bike lanes on First Street, and instead focusing on 3rd Avenue as a parallel route, not constructing separated bike lanes, but more, as Brian was mentioning, signing and striping it as a lower volume parallel route suitable to help get bikes off First Street. So I'm going to take you through a number of locations where we're doing some a little bit more detailed alternatives analysis and kind of preliminary engineering. The first location is Golf Club Road and Shaft. This is an intersection that was also looked at in your existing TSP. We are looking at a couple of different alternatives at this location and collecting feedback. This intersection, but actually what we're finding in our forecast is that although this intersection has enough traffic to, or soon will have enough traffic to warrant having a traffic signal, as an all-way stop, it is projected to continue to meet your level of service standard. So we're not seeing it as essential to plan a signal or a roundabout. However, if the growth forecast changes over what we're now seeing, it may need some more than a stop sign. And it also, you may want to be improved just as a gateway to the city. So this is the alternative, laying out the intersection as a roundabout. Some of the designs this go around might look a little bit different than last time because we're now projecting keeping Golf Club as well as Wilco as well as Shaft all as 3-lane facilities, so 1 through lane in each direction and a center turn lane, rather than looking at 5-lane facilities in the future. So we're looking at a roundabout option, as well as a signal option, but also kind of a do nothing and keep it as an always stop option. The feedback that we've gotten in the open houses have been generally positive towards the idea of roundabouts, just as long as we can demonstrate that they are can accommodate agricultural traffic. The other location I want to talk to you a little bit about the alternatives we're looking at is Wilco, Staton, and Washington Street. This is also an intersection that had a roundabout identified in your existing TSP, but we've taken another look at it to see, is there anything that could be done to kind of help clean up, tighten up, and make this intersection a little bit more clear and friendly for all modes. So key to doing that is reducing the number of legs at this intersection from 5 down to 4. We have identified one way to do that. It does include removing Jetter's Way from directly connecting into the intersection. This maintains full access for the fire station on Ida Street, but it would change circulation for trucks and vehicles fueling at Staton, at the fuel station. But we're also looking at a connection that runs east-west, just on the south end of this aerial photo, that would connect Jetter's Way to the east. That would probably be necessary for this alternative to be feasible. And this is the roundabout option. It keeps all 5 legs of the intersection basically intact at the intersection, and this has a little bit slightly different design than what was in the last TSP, just based on how roundabout design has evolved over the last 15 years or so. The other location where we're looking at a couple different, well, actually not a couple different options, it's really a plan for it or do nothing, is at the intersection of Gulf Lane and Cascade Highway. There's currently an IGA in place with the county that talks about needing to relocate Gulf Lane to tee into Whitney Street at the traffic signal. Once traffic volumes on Gulf Lane would warrant that from a safety perspective or operations perspective. The traffic signal at Whitney Street was designed to be able to accommodate a 4th leg with an easy retrofit, but of course the Gulf Lane realignment we know is not easy or cheap, just given the wetlands that it's crossing. So our recommendation at this point is that this project, however, remain in the TSP because our growth forecasts, we're not showing this being needed within the horizon of the TSP, but the growth forecasts really did not assume any growth on Gulf Lane, really, other than the application that you've been considering recently. There's enough buildable land within the city's city limits, and primarily looking at growth areas on the east side of town, that there really was not future urban growth boundary expansions anticipated in our growth forecasts here. But if something were to change out here, and this area in the future was to continue to grow and expand, then this relocation of Gulf Lane would be necessary. I've got 2 more locations where I'll talk to you about the alternatives we're looking at. So the other area is the series of S-curves. You make 2 series of S-curves getting from downtown out to 10th Street. So the first 2 S-curves I'm going to talk you through are on 6th Street, where you navigate from Washington to Jefferson. The current TSP really looked at making changes to all 4 intersections in that series of S-curves. And so we've tried to look at it as a corridor and figure out how can we make some improvements, but without being quite as extensive as what was envisioned before. So for this, for 6th Avenue, we looked at really 2 options. This first option shows us really disconnecting the 3 or 4-way intersections at each of those S-curves so that it's just a through street. I think what we found is that down in this area, this approach to the street could be kind of disconnected. There'd be no curb cut here, and you would have really no significant impact on anybody trying to circulate around town, because you're kind of mostly dealing with very quiet local streets there. But at the intersection of Jefferson and 6th, reducing that to just a curve, I think our committee decided actually would be too impactful, given the desire to use Jefferson Street to get to the school and to downtown. So the other alternative looked at for this series of curves included in keeping a 4-way intersection, possibly an all-way stop at 6th and Jefferson, but still doing some modifications down at Washington Street to simplify that intersection. So similar look at 10th Avenue when you're navigating from Jefferson Street to Santiam Street. And what we're showing at Jefferson and 10th is just, again, a simplification of the intersection so that it's a little bit more clear that the through direction is making the curve, and that Jefferson Street east of 10th is teeing in and is the stop controlled movement. Then we have 2 alternatives looking up at 10th Avenue and Santiam, one being a roundabout, as shown here. Oh, I don't have a picture of the other alternative, but the other alternative is instead planning for an all-way stop or signal up at 10th and Santiam. We do think that 10th and Santiam will need some additional traffic control in the future. And that road realignment will be important to that occurring. So looking at some of the safety locations I mentioned, the main recommendation specific to safety that we're making within the city limits is to reinstate the protected left turns at 1st and Washington, although maybe a little bit differently than it was done before, with a more of what we call the flashing yellow arrow, or a traffic signal that can handle both a protected left turn as well as a permitted left turn. So you're kind of getting the best of both worlds and having both that protection when you need it, but also still being able to make that left turn when there's no traffic. The other safety recommendation is for a signal at the westbound ramps at Highway 22, but this is a recommendation that's outside of the city limits and needs to be coordinated with ODOT. As far as some of the safety issues at the other interchanges at Fern Ridge Road and Old Mahama Road, we took another look at it, and it's consistent with ODOT's prior safety studies. The really only way to address the safety issues at those interchanges is to prohibit people going straight across the highway or making left turns off of the highway, or on left turns onto the highway, which those kinds of restrictions might be palatable at Fern Ridge Road, but we know that at Old Mahama Road, that kind of restriction would create a lot of out-of-direction travel. From a policy standpoint for the TSP, we're just revisiting the city's functional class system, the functional classification of the roadways. And the main changes are looking kind of outside and the urban growth areas at kind of simplifying the future streets. Kind of looked at, there's a large number of collectors and local streets on the maps, and we've simplified them down to the major routes that we want to make sure get constructed as collectors or neighborhood routes. We're providing some cross-sections in the TSP that help people understand when you see that arterial or neighborhood route designation, helping them understand, well, what does that mean? Although we'll be keeping the actual dimensions in the city's design standards. As I mentioned, we're going to be able to downsize some of the future cross-sections on several facilities. We're going to be recommending Cascade Highway remain 3 lanes and not 5 as previously forecast. Same with Golf Club Road. As well as the TSP also identified kind of spot-specific widening at some intersections, and we will be kind of backing down that recommendation as well. This is just demonstrating. Yes.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask a question?
Go ahead, please.
So on the I'm sorry, can you go back to that? On Golf Club Road, did you have anyone state that they had safety concerns, like making left turns into residences? I feel like that's come up in past.
I can't recall if we did or not specifically, but we would be recommending that road be improved as it's brought into the urban area to have a center left turn lane, as well as bike lanes and sidewalks when it's improved.
Okay, thank you.
So we just recently had our second open house, collecting feedback on some of the alternatives I shared with you. And as I mentioned, we did have support for roundabouts, but only if we could demonstrate that they could accommodate the farm vehicles. And we had continued support for the safety and bicycle and pedestrian projects. Will be the next phase of the TSP. We're considering future funding and cost estimating these alternatives and looking at the projects that we said were those tier 1 top priorities and trying to identify kind of what are the projects that fit within the city's current forecasted transportation budget, with the main sources of revenues coming from the state gas tax, ODOT Surface Transportation Program, your street maintenance fee, system development charges, and local gas tax. And so we have a couple different financial futures I won't get into, but just trying to assess how much money in the future is available for actual capital improvements versus just your roadway resurfacing. So many of your projects are kind of both a combination of maintenance as well as enhancements. So we'll be diving a little bit deeper into that as part of our next steps and finalizing the document. So with that, as I mentioned, we're here to take any comments or questions from you. We're going to try to reflect the additional feedback we received here tonight, as well as what we heard in our last meeting from our advisory committees and the public, to be crafting a draft document that we hope to bring back to you in a work session in April. And with that, I want to thank you.
Are there questions?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, please.
I have a question about the crash counts that you had with the orange dots. How were those calculated? Were they calculated just by a crash count flat, or was it a crash count based off of the average trips that are in that area?
Yeah, it's based on the amount of traffic that's there too, so it's looking at the total number of crashes and comparing it to the volume. It's what we use to kind of come up with a rate. We're also comparing it to similar facilities throughout the state, so ODOT maintains some indexes that would help us understand if a crash rate that we're seeing on a city collector versus a highway, how it compares to other facilities throughout the state, to see if it's kind of above what would be typical or common for a comparable facility, and then also looking for locations on ODOT's top kind of 5% safety locations throughout the state. And Brian, maybe you can help me recall if any of those were the highest locations that we identified within the study area, but I can't recall if they were on the state's SPIS list. Okay. So the 4 intersections that were on the state highway are showing up on the state's kind of highest crash location. Not highest, but in their top, what they call the 5% list.
Is there any oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead,
Interrupt
please.
your line of questioning.
Go ahead.
I just had a question specifically regarding that. Is that primarily people turning left off of Fern Ridge onto Highway 22? I noticed that you had put that one part as a place that you would cancel left, turning left onto that area, and then that traffic assumably would be diverted somewhere else to either Mahama or Cascade Highway on ramps. Was that specifically because of that, or is that just...
Yeah, the types of crashes that you see at those kind of intersections are primarily people turning left onto the highway from the side street, or trying to dart straight across and make a through move, kind of go straight all the way across the highway.
Well, the real problem with those two intersections is the angle, the way those both
Yeah.
Old Mahama Highway and Fern Ridge angle across Highway 22. You're trying to turn across it or turn back to the left, you're trying to
Yeah.
see that oncoming traffic, not easy, and probably dangerous. I think it is, yeah. Probably why you guys identified it.
Yeah.
Tell me about roundabouts. Do you ask folks if they've ever encountered a roundabout before you ask them if they sort of approve or not?
No, I
not
don't.
to the extent of have you ever driven in Paris or anything, but where's the nearest roundabout that us local country folk could experience?
Counselor Quigley knows which the closest one is.
Just drive to Sisters, Mr. Mayor.
There you go. Well, that's the
Sisters.
one I was thinking of. There's one in Albany in East Albany.
Kaiser.
The nearest one is in Kaiser,
There's one in Kaiser. Okay.
Yep.
and there's several of them in Yamaha County.
Okay.
Yeah, they are
Troutdale.
really, so the benefits of roundabouts are that they're proven to be safer than a traffic signal. Because the idea is that when you're, this area where you have conflicts, you're slowing people down to all of a similar speed. So if you do have crashes, they're occurring at a very low speed. The lower the speed, the less likely the crash is to be result in serious injuries. As opposed to a traffic signal, sometimes if you have people failing to stop for a traffic signal, they just kind of space out, or they're trying to run the light. Well, those crashes tend to be higher speed, which ends up having higher injury rates. So the state is really favoring roundabouts where they make sense. You do have to go through an analysis to make sure that it is the best treatment for the location. But the state, for their rural intersections in particular, any intersection on a state highway that needs traffic control, they now have a mandate that you assess whether a roundabout can work, and kind of have to do that test. Can we do a roundabout first? If that's a no, then you start looking at other options. So states and counties and cities as well, they're definitely growing in favor and becoming much more common.
Okay. Cost-wise, are they cheaper than signalized intersections? Just generally. I mean,
They would tend to, it just depends what environment you're putting them into. So if you have a location that already has sidewalks and curb ramps, ADA accessible ramps on all four corners, it's going to be cheaper to put in a traffic signal. If you don't have any of those items and you are needing to build, improve the roadway and build sidewalks and curb ramps, or redo all the curb ramps, then a roundabout can be cost competitive. The higher speed the facility is, the further out your roundabout design needs to go to kind of make the road curve a little bit and help people slow down. So the higher speed, the higher the footprint, and that can increase the cost. So I would say by default, roundabouts can be more expensive, but they are seen to can have a better life cycle cost, because you don't have maintenance of the signal cabinet hardware lights, so you're less staff time and electricity.
okay. All right, thank you. Any other questions?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Not a question, just an observation and a comment. The Kettleson folks have done a fantastic job so far in their efforts to analyze the TSB. When I was first asked to be on this committee, I'm like, I'm not sure I want to do that deal. But it's been fantastic for me. It's been very fascinating from an eye-opening perspective on what actually goes into addressing our transportation needs in the future. And if you guys haven't had a chance to take a look at it yet, I recommend doing a little bit more, to attend some of the meetings and see what really takes place. So it's really pretty neat so far. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Anything else? Thank
All
you.
right, thank you.
Thank
bet.
you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Dan, is there anything else you need or want to add to that?
No, sir.
Okay, all right. What's the next step?
Next step is the consulting team will be working on a draft of the plan. There'll be a advisory committee meeting, and they'll be back before you in
April.
in April.
Okay, all right, okay, more in April.
With the idea that shortly after that begin the adoption process, which will start with a presentation and public hearing before the Planning Commission, and then be back before you for public hearing and consideration of adopting the plan.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right. Nothing else than that. Let's go to a Mill Creek Park concept plan. And Mr. Ludwig.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. As you are aware, the city purchased some property in the fall, I believe it was the fall of 2017, just north of the Lambert detention facility. And the purpose being, the primary purpose was for a park. Last spring, the city put out an RFP proposal to help us design a master plan for that space that is along Kendall Way. This is an effort for us to produce some renderings and a good design so we can go out and look for financing to build this park. And through that RFP process, AKS Engineering and Forestry was interviewed, and we signed a contract with them. Tonight they're here to give us an update of where they're at with the plan. And with that, let me introduce Mimi Dukas, and Chuck Gregory is here also.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. My name is Mimi Dukas. I'm with AKS Engineering, and we're very excited to talk this evening about the Mill Creek Park. So just to start, we'll go ahead and get you oriented. I have to start by saying this is a long rectangular site, and everything had to be rotated to the side. So north is facing me, and that can be rather confusing. We had to keep turning boards during all our public outreach. But to get you oriented, we've got the middle school at the top right corner of the page. As Lance said, there is a subdivision that's planned in this location. There are 2 stormwater ponds that are under construction in this location. And then we've got a large open space in this triangle. Mill Creek comes across this blue line. The property in question is 23 acres. It's this red area. And so the property does have some constraints to it, but it's also got some neat opportunities. There is a floodplain across the property, and there are some scattered wetlands that we're trying to work through. So procedurally, and that's zooming in on the more active portion of the park that we did our planning efforts on, you can also see there's some existing structures on the site and some existing trees, mature trees that we wanted to consider. So this is more about the background to the project itself. Lance explained our involvement in the project. The process we went through, we began by sitting down with staff, talking about what they wanted to achieve with the project, what their objectives were. We heard from a member of the Parks Advisory Committee as well. At that point, we began to do an inventory of the property, did a survey, wetland, natural resource assessments, looked at the trees that were out on site, and then we started our public outreach process. We began with a community open house that was wide open. It was really, we described it as pick a park, design a park. where we really gave everybody the chance to pull out skinny paper and templates and place different park design elements on the property and design the park. It was well attended, and I think it was a really good start to the conversation. From there, we refined that park's we put some alternative designs together with different concepts from what we heard from the community. We took that back to staff and did some refinement of that, got it down to a preferred design, took that back out to the community, did another open house, and then we had the boards at the library for everybody to view at their leisure, and here we are tonight in front of you. The first workshop we did, like I said, we started with aerial photographs, and we did cutout pieces of the different park elements. So scaled versions of what a baseball park or baseball diamond would look like, what a soccer pitch looks like, properly sized, some different amounts of parking fields, and we let everybody choose the elements that they thought made sense for a park and start to arrange the best way to do that. We also did some inventory of what they thought was important within a park from a programming standpoint, so that we could get past just the loudest voice in the room, but everybody got to vote and choose the elements that they thought were important. It was a great way to get feedback. We had great participation. Within that, we had 5 different tables that were staffed individually. So each table had a member of AKS. They had a member of the Parks Advisory Committee, and then we had citizens. So those groups would work together to come up with their different concepts. So out of that, we had 5 distinct sets of ideas. This is a summary of the inventory that we went through. A lot of the feedback we received was an emphasis on gathering spaces for families. Talking about picnic shelters, places where they could come with their families, have recreational time. It was important to have restrooms for those facilities, walking trails, ways to engage with nature. Those are all important. They did want sports fields, but they were not the primary emphasis. They were just a component of the park facility. Things that did not receive a lot of votes, dog park. Dog parks tend to bring out a lot of emotions in people. Some people absolutely love dog parks. They think they're the most important thing. Other people think they are more of a nuisance. Your community did not vote that as a high priority in this location, mostly from the location itself. It simply wasn't needed for this particular park. There was also not a need for disc golf or tennis. But everything else scored fairly well.
Question. Excuse me.
Yes.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Could you define naturalistic play, what do we call play elements? Yes.
Naturalistic play elements are playground facilities that can that mimic nature. So you can have logs that are put together that can be a balancing, like a balance beam type thing. Play elements like that.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah.
Counselor, much like we have at Pioneer Park currently.
Right.
That's a natural play area.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Another item that came out of the conversation was a need for food carts. When we get into, I'll show you the preferred design, the stormwater facilities allow, we hope, an opportunity to put, they take up a large amount of land. Let's see here, where's a good image of those? Anyway, the stormwater facilities are on the right-hand side of the page. When we're doing the design, they're large open basins. They take a lot of land. They're necessary for the stormwater treatment for the city, but we wanted to try and turn those into an asset as well. We can't put a lot of structures in there. Nothing can block the flow of water and catch debris when there's any type of flood event. There's limitations for how the grass will be able to react when it's underwater during the winter months. We do think there is an opportunity for sports fields within there. We kind of need to see how those stormwater facilities really function once they're really up and running. But for the design, we really tried to put the sports fields within those stormwater facilities to just take advantage of the space that's there. They're probably more recreational spaces for pickup games or small summer leagues, things like that, not big, formal, organized sports. So that was really the active side of the park, and where we accommodated sports fields. The remainder of the park was really focused more on structures, family gatherings, things like that. The food carts are an element that can serve any larger recreational events that happen during those summer months. So if you have a soccer tournament, you would have the concessions there with food carts. So that was an unusual piece of feedback we got from the community.
Question, please.
Yeah.
Are there potentially enough soccer pitches there to have a soccer tournament?
I believe so.
Like 3, 5, 6?
Well, we'll get into the design here in a minute, and you can see what we've got.
That's fine.
So once we took that information from that first open house, we developed 3 alternative designs, putting in those program elements. And what we're really trying to do in these designs is organize them in regards to relationships. We want to make sure that we are having like uses complementing like uses. So for example, some of the uses are things like a skate spot and a basketball court. That's going to tend to attract teenagers, and they have a certain energy that you might want to have separate from your picnic areas or your tot lot small children areas. So we want to have special visibility into the teenage areas, and we want it more quiet and protected with parental sight lines to play areas for younger children. So when we did the 3 alternatives, those are the things that we're trying to think through. Making sure that parking is available adjacent to the parking intensive uses. So we came up with 3 different alternative designs that organize those different uses with different concepts. We went over those with staff and members of the Parks Advisory Committee, and came up with a preferred alternative. And the preferred alternative is what we took back out to another neighborhood workshop. This is the preferred alternative. So you can see that we have, and let's see here, my next page, there you go. So these are the soccer pitches that you were asking about, Mayor. And we've really focused on soccer within those stormwater facilities because they don't have permanent structures. The goals can be moved and can adapt to any flooding events. So we have 2 full-size pitches designed in there, and then we've got 8 youth pitches.
I'm sorry, the little green squares, what are those? I know what the big ones are.
These 4 right here?
Yeah.
And these 4?
What are those?
Those are for children. They're the smaller, the younger ages.
Still soccer, still open?
Still soccer.
Okay.
Okay. They sometimes do 3-on-3 soccer with little kids, or 5-on-5. They've got the little pop-up goals that are little half dome. Okay. And you can get a lot of kids playing soccer on a Saturday morning.
All of that, the soccer facility there, all of that's within those detention basins, right?
The soccer is, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So we've also put some active sport activity in the middle. So we've got a baseball diamond in the middle. We've got a covered basketball court in this location. We have a skate spot in this location. So again, we've tried to keep the active sport area in a central location. We've got parking that wraps around. We didn't want one big giant field of parking, we wanted to break it up a bit so it had a softer feel to it. Up in this side, we've got the picnic areas, the restroom facilities where you can have more family gathering. We've got a play structure up in here, trail facility coming along the creek itself. On this side, we've got more of a flexible open lawn area that can also have amphitheater. It's really not an amphitheater, it's too flat for that, but a performance space that would be available. We did talk about archery, but we feel like a performing space is a little safer. We did try to make sure that we were maximizing tree preservation. There are beautiful old trees out there. Lance didn't think that was the most efficient choice in the world, but I think it will be nice. This plan has about 129 parking spaces. We've kept the playground in the shaded area so that you've got a choice for how much solar access you have. We did give a lot of consideration to maintenance. We do hear that from parks districts constantly, that maintenance is such an expensive component to their operations that we need to think through that on the front end to make sure that we're not causing long-term capital burdens on the community. So that is the preferred design. Like I said, we took that back out to the library and had that out for a while so people could take a look at it at their leisure. And now we're here before you this evening. Any questions?
Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead, please.
So I saw on there that a splash pad was kind of high on the list. Was that just, was that like kind of a high maintenance kind of thing?
We spent a lot of time talking about it, and in conversations with Lance, we're thinking there might be more central locations for that within the community. Okay. That this is a little further out and that you get better access in some other locations.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me, just from a maintenance and, I don't know, almost a surveillance standpoint, I don't want to lean on this too heavily, but it isn't really possible to see this whole thing from one area, from one place, is it?
We tried to make sure that sight lines were really working from Kindle for the most part.
Okay.
We've also tried to allow police and maintenance vehicles to circulate through.
Okay.
So they can get into the parking field and see the remainder of the park area.
Mm-hmm. Even in this almost perfect community of ours, we have elements that every once in a while something goes wrong and they need to pull up something by the roots to see what makes it grow. And I just get concerned about things like that.
Understandably. And
okay.
It's a real thing, but with the trying to balance that with preserving the trees was really what we were trying to find the right balance point. But I think there are good sight lines through for the most part, and they can pull in here and see this area pretty well too.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I have a question about the covered basketball court. Will that actually be lighted or not?
I don't think that's been determined at this point.
Okay.
Generally, the park was expected to only be daylight hours.
Gotcha.
That helps reduce the evening activities, the nuisance, and some of the safety concerns that you were talking about. The other thing that we heard from the neighborhood was making sure that we had enough parking so that parking did not overflow into their neighborhood on the other side of Kindle Way. It is not expected that we'll have parking along Kindle. That's part of why we've got a substantial amount of parking within the park itself.
Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead.
I just wanted to express that I like the covered basketball court area so people can play that when it's raining too. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question.
Yes. go
Actually, I
ahead.
have a couple of questions. But, So, talking about the basketball court and it not being lit, how does that function well in the darker evening months of the year? I think part of what I've heard from the community, I went to one of the park planning, was that there isn't enough for our youth to do, and so if it's not, I mean, you can still turn off lights at a certain time, but I guess I would have liked to see maybe some option for lighting where kids can go until 7 or 8 o'clock at night and play basketball with their friends before they have to go home.
And that's something that could be added. It is generally, we work with park districts across the region, and they really do, for the most part, try to limit park activities to daylight hours. The difference in maintenance and security is pretty substantial. But if you as a community want to make that decision, it's fairly easy to add lighting to that structure.
Other questions?
Yes.
Go ahead.
The trails, are they all ADA accessible?
I would anticipate that they would be. The site's very flat. And actually, one of the points that I skipped over was part of the feedback we received in the first open house was the importance of a universally acceptable or a universally accessible play area, playground, and making sure that it was beyond just ADA accommodating, but it's really designed to be inclusive from beginning to end, so that all citizens can be able to use that facility regardless of ability or age. So that has to do with surface choices, access, height of facilities, making sure that that you've got graduated access to play structures, things like that. So that was very important to the community. There are specific consultants that get involved in detailed playground structure design that can be universally accessible. But in regards to the remainder of the park, I think the design could be ADA accessible throughout. The exception to that, the struggle that we might have is with these stormwater facilities. There's a substantial berm just by the nature of those basins, and so we'll need to be careful about how we design access down into those to make sure that they're as accessible as we can make them. But that will be a tricky component to accessibility.
I jump back in. The paths, basically walking paths rather than multi-use like bicycles?
Correct. It would be more, this is really an internal loop. It's not a regional walking facility that might make sense for a combined bike and ped. This is more going for a little internal walk.
Yeah, okay.
Now, what there is also an opportunity for is there are existing trails up here on the other side of Mill Creek that the middle school uses, and there's a lot of cross-country use back in there. That area has existing trails that'll probably be formalized a bit with bark chips to make those a real nature path system. That's a little tricky because there's a lot of mosaic wetlands in that location, but because they're existing trails, we've got the ability to use bark chips and still be able to get through Department of State Lands and Corps of Engineers. But there is a process that we're going to have to go through for that.
Okay. Other questions?
Yes.
I have a question about, you were talking about reducing those other areas that are on the other side of Mill Creek. But is there's not a bridge or anything to get across to get to the other side?
Yeah, there's a bridge.
There's a small bridge existing. I don't know if that's adequate or if it needs to be improved.
It needs to be improved, but it's pretty substantial now.
Okay.
It's also important to keep in mind that this is the grand vision. This is the master plan for the park. There's a lot of refinement that might happen over time, and part of that may be phasing the project. So depending on how financing comes available for the project, there's components that you can phase in or build over time. And there's going to be refinements to it as well as you get into more detailed design of it. This is really programming and making sure the elements that the community want are in there, that they relate to each other and make sense. But there's a lot of refinement between now and a constructed park.
Mr. Mayor, I have another.
Yes,
I have
go ahead.
2 more questions.
Okay.
Back to the trails, and I'm wondering if, I don't see it on the rendering, if there's any like lamp posts planned for lighting for safety. I know that there's some parks in the Salem area that have that because the parks operate until 10 p.m. cutoff.
Generally, again, if you add lighting, people tend to use the park in those later hours. And in our experience with parks departments, they prefer it to be really daylight hours only. The exception to that is really around the restroom facilities. Sometimes there'll be a safety light on the restroom, just for real security purposes. Restrooms typically have a timed lock on them so that they've got limited hours as well. But typically, parks departments do not want lights in the park in the evening. You can make that choice. That's, again, easy to add in. But the general pattern is daylight hours.
So is there any like research out there that says that a park is safer and like people just won't use it? Because I mean, in my experience, and that's just me subjectively saying that, lighting doesn't deter me from using a park or not. The posted hours is what deters me from using a park, and that's just one person. But I'm just thinking like safety. If there's people out there walking the trails because that's the time that they have to go, there's that safety aspect in the deterrent of crime with lighting, proper lighting.
And my feedback is really from the maintenance departments from bigger park districts around the region. So they're the ones who are saying that the safety is improved when you limit those hours.
Thanks. And then my last question is about the tot area. What kind of material is being thought to be planned for the ground?
I don't know that that's been sorted out. Normally we do a engineered bark chip, which is cleaner than a normal bark chip. It sounds funny, but that's what it is. It's engineered wood fiber.
You're talking about the playground? So right now,
You want to come up to the microphone?
Yeah, Chuck.
Get the microphone, please.
Go for the microphone. Give him your name, Chuck.
thanks. My name's Chuck Gregory. I'm a civil engineer with AKS Engineering. Are you talking about the playground area as the tot lot?
Yeah, she had mentioned something about a tot area.
Okay. So right now, engineered wood fiber is kind of the standard for playground surfacing. It is an ADA accessible surfacing, but right now we're costing out a sort of a cushioned rubber matting that also meets fall protection. So it could be very walkable. You could even take a wheelchair up to it. That's kind of the newer materials. It's a lot more expensive, probably on the order of about $100,000 difference cost. But Lance and I are still kind of working through those cost estimates. But that's kind of what we're throwing in the budget right now as we look for grants.
I do want to point out that this is just a rendering. Once we start obtaining funds, we'll actually hire, the second phase of this project is actually designing engineered plans. And in those engineered plans, we will spec all that out, and we'll have more of an opportunity to discuss those issues. But right now, this is really just a planning document. This is kind of looking, and this is what we're going to have. We don't know exactly what everything's going to be built out of yet. It really depends on how much money we get and that kind of thing. But, so, again, this is just a concept plan to look at from the 40,000-foot view. This is kind of what we're looking at. Materials, things like that will be looked at a future date when we start obtaining funds to do the park.
Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Just one quick confirmation. The kids from the middle school will still be able to just walk over, correct?
Sure. Yep.
Because it shares an adjoining property. I mean, the property lines share, right, common.
Yeah.
Yeah, Councilman Quigley, you can see up there that, see the north, or the
East
soccer field to the east, the
Yep.
small, just a piece. That's going to be a pathway there, that gray, and
Right.
that, and the middle school's right there. They'll be able to come right over and go down.
I've been at that spot, that's why I'm just confirming.
Yeah.
So that path will get you over.
Lance, does everybody know that one cell of that detention facility has already been constructed, but the second cell is yet to be constructed?
They may not all know,
Okay.
but that's what is out there currently.
Okay.
There's only half the cell is built.
So what would be towards the bottom of the page, that half has already been constructed, it's seeded, it's starting its first year of growth, so it'll be a good indicator to see how well the second cell, which is the one more to the top of the page, when that gets constructed, how well that grass sort of rebounds from the wet winters, whatnot.
Okay. Here's one. Anytime we build a park, there's a vocal group in town that wants a skate park for the kids. And I think those are notoriously expensive. And you may have some idea of numbers. But neighboring communities have built them. One of the to me, amusing things about it is they're always out on the fringe of a community because people fall down when they're thrashing around on those things, and a skinned knee or elbow usually invites some comment that isn't always welcomed in the area around it. So what do skate parks cost? I mean, so we could answer some of those questions and why nots.
Well, what we've shown is actually a skate spot, and it's something we did in Wilsonville, where they've got a skate park elsewhere in the community, and they really wanted just a spot where the one member of the family can be entertained over there while the rest of the family is watching a softball game. So one kid in the family does softball and the other kid does the skate spot, and the parents can kind of sit in the middle and keep track of both of them. So it's not quite as intense, and the cost is a little lower. Do you know what the skate spot price ended up being in Wilsonville?
I think it's a few $100,000, but I need to look into that.
Yeah, I've done some research on those myself, and I've got one in Wilsonville. I live right next to it. They range anywhere from about $250,000 to about $550,000, depending on the materials you use. The nicer ones are built out of concrete, and they're going to run you about $400,000, $500,000.
Okay. Wow.
Right.
Okay.
So that's like Mimi was saying, the skate spot is, I'm not a skateboarder, but they have lots of things that go into those. The skate spot is more almost even like it can even be sort of I don't want to say relaxational area, but there's benches usually involved where, again, maybe the skateboarders are riding on them, but can also be used to sit on. It's sort of not quite a formal skate park, but
It's kind of like a plaza where people are allowed to skateboard. Normally, if you've got a plaza, you're trying to put little metal thingies on the benches so people don't skateboard and tear them up. In this case, you're designing it so they can do that. So it's got an urban design kind of element to it. It could be the size of this room, and it's just got some elements where somebody can grab a board and entertain themselves a little bit. But if they want to spend a whole morning doing it, they're probably going to go to an actual skate park.
Okay. All right.
And like Mimi said, if you look at where we've positioned that, it's by the parking lot, which is going to, there's going to be some background noise that will help cut down on some of that language. They're kind of tucked in behind what may become the maintenance shed, and then, of course, the basketball court as well. So it really is sort of located, not necessarily out in the boonies, but in an area where maybe it's not going to receive that voices and whatnot, whereas like he says up in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see more of the younger kid play areas, hopefully far enough away, drowned out, blocked by the maintenance shed and whatnot.
Okay, all right, thank you. Yeah.
And it's actually, what I was describing about the parents with kids at both places, that's part of why we put one of the picnic shelters in the middle. So a parent can hang out at that picnic shelter and keep an eye on kids in both spots, or maybe one's at the basketball court and one's at the softball field, or baseball rather. Any other questions? Well, thank you.
Thank you.
We've enjoyed
Thanks,
working on
Chuck.
it.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Very good. You're going to actually expect people to watch their kids? What's next? Oh, Resolution 986, authorizing an application for a local government grant from the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department for development of Mill Creek. Lance?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before you tonight is Resolution 986, and whether or not the City Council will authorize the city manager to apply for an Oregon Parks and Recreation Department local government large grant for the Mill Creek Park. You've got the background. I believe Mimi has given you the background. I'll just briefly touch on that. The city purchased a 23-acre site a couple of years ago. Primary purpose for that park was for a park. In September of 2017, we hired AKS as a consultant to help us with the master plan. On February 22nd, AKS and the city held a citywide open house. It was attended by over 40 people. And from that, they developed 3 concept plans. On September 11th, the 3 concept plans were presented to the city's Parks and Recreational Board. And from that, they decided which of the 3 plans they liked. And from the other 2 plans that they did not prefer, they took elements from those and put them on to the primary concept plan. And then in November, AKS and the city held a second meeting. It was attended by 8 people. So there wasn't much, it didn't look like there was much enthusiasm at the second meeting as there was the first meeting. AKS did bring the 3 original concept plans as well as the 4th plan that was derived from the Parks and Recreational Board's comments. And what you saw tonight was the conglomeration of all 3 of those, and that is the 4th master plan. Again, this is a master plan. This isn't the final engineered plan. So if we go and we get funding from the state, more than likely this is going to be a phased park. We're not going to be probably affording to build all of these elements at one time. So we'll have to phase it. And that'll give us more flexibility of what we want and where we want it. But this is, an overview. Again, it's a 40,000-foot elevation look at that park. So before you tonight is 986. Staff recommends that the city, you approve that, but your options are, you could choose to approve a Resolution 986, or you could choose to deny Resolution 986.
Okay.
And that's really all I have.
Thank you, Lance. Is there any thought of what kind of money we're talking about? I mean, all we can get, obviously, but are there numbers on what the state will allow in these large grants?
The large grant you can apply for up to $750,000.
Okay, there we go.
That's very rarely ever given. Most of the time they're in the neighborhood of $400,000 to $500,000.
Okay, all right.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
we've applied for those in the past, correct?
Pioneer Park are revamping remodel there with the restroom, yes.
Right, okay. And how many times have been the recipient?
As far as I know, Counselor, it's just the one time, and that was...
It's Sandy Ann Park also.
Sandy Ann Park as well. The old timers know, I'm sorry.
Mr. Mayor, how many times have we applied for those? If we've gotten them twice, how many times have we applied?
Probably 5 or 6 times. Our history seems to be that we need to apply 2 or 3 times before we are successful.
Okay, all right. Other comments and thoughts, folks? You've heard the presentation, read the
Mr. Mayor.
notes in our agenda this evening. What should we do? Pretty easy, I think.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question.
Yes.
Are any of you guys like professionally trained in like grant writing, like, or are we using some type of consultant to write these grants?
We have not in the past. I know I have applied for a grant and been received one for the pedestrian bridge, but this is a much larger grant. I know, I don't believe you used one previously when we got one for Pioneer Park. It was written by the former Public Works Director. Am I correct there, Dan? And I think we received $375,000 for that restroom.
In your professional opinion, do you feel like it would be something that you guys could look into that would be worth it?
When I started this, that was my original thought, was to do that. That's why I wanted to hire someone for some professional renderings and some help with the master plan. I thought about that. I haven't dove into it too much. I'm having their wetland scientists help me now with parts of that application. As far as the written narrative, I have not reached out to anybody yet, though.
Thanks.
Okay. Other questions or thoughts? What would you folks like to do with this?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I move to adopt resolution number 986.
I second.
Okay, I think I have a motion and a second to adopt resolution 986. On this one, Alyssa, would you poll the council, please?
Sure.
Unless is there any discussion, any more discussion? Okay, Alyssa, please.
Counselor Quigley?
Yes.
Counselor Ort?
Yes.
Counselor Patty?
Yes.
Counselor Hook?
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
Okay, thank you. All right. And the next thing, council liaisons. And this is kind of different. And it started with a letter from one of the interest groups in the community that wanted specifically a liaison for their group. And that got me thinking, and I shared that with Keith, what should we do with these? There should be attempts at not keeping track, that's not the right words, but just stay informed as to what different groups are doing. I really would like to try to forge a better relationship with the fire district if we could. We need to work with the city of Sublimity. We've got mutual concerns, I hope mutual, that we should be working with them. There's several areas, the water control district, the school district, these people that we affect them, they affect us. And this liaison thing, too often in the past, or most of the time in the past, I think, was simply if someone took an active part in a group, they became a kind of an advocate for that group. And there's probably nothing wrong with that, but I'm going to have to give credit to Keith for took the germ of an idea and then expanded it to what you see tonight. A wider concept, and this also goes back to Councilor Quigley's asked for a review of Resolution 809. The mayor shall appoint one or more council members to serve as representatives to all committees, boards, or agency outside the city government in which the city has an interest. So now this is county and state, this water thing at Detroit. We need to be actively working on water issues yesterday, not down the street a couple of years when the Corps thinks they want to drain the lake to do something. We need active work on these things. And so Keith and I put this together, an idea, and I think there are 3, 5, 7, 8. Those are the ones that we've had before. Some are inactive. Last council had a liaison with the school board, Parks and Recreation, Regional Transportation, Library, Public Safety Commission, the Santiam Communication Council. Is that even in?
We don't think it's even.
Does that still work?
I don't think it's
not even there anymore.
Right.
And Marion County Veterans Task Force. I should be probably involved in that, but I'm not. So what and again, I'm going to give most of the credit to Keith on working this up, put together a proposal that would have someone, and I think there's something for everyone here, economic development, local, county, state, and federal. That would be things like somebody maybe staying in touch with the people at SEDCOR. That would be somebody being part of RDS once in a while. Government, county. We have meetings with the county every month. There are other things, state and federal, highway stuff, public safety, state police, emergency planning, state police, fire department, community relations, social media, newspapers, community outreach, surveys, and city projects, advisory groups, master plans, and city projects. So, if we were to adopt this, I would ask people to, since there are just enough to go around, I would ask everyone to maybe try to identify one of these they'd like to work with. And the way to make it really useful is to have reports once in a while. Not every meeting, but every month or 2 or 3. What are these groups that you took on? What are they doing? It means more meetings, which is why we all signed up for this, right? More meetings. What about family? What's that? More meetings.
Can I ask a question? I have a couple questions.
Certainly. I think I'm done.
Okay, so to your question of the meetings, so how often do we meet with these groups, and then how do we, and maybe Keith, you have an answer to this, how do we identify which groups belong in these categories? So a little bit more, I like this idea, but a little bit more direction on what these committees are, and then how often are we expected to go to them, and then when would we report back?
That's where the great thinking comes in, and that's down the road here.
Well, I think the idea on part of this was to have, kind of I say my staff report, to have something that isn't so narrowly focused, but a little more, broadly focused. And part of this would be, I think, as would be needed or necessary. I mean, like we had the regional solutions team come to talk about an intersection. That would be an opportunity to bring a council member in to have those discussions. If there's conversations happening with a neighboring organization, or maybe even with the county in terms of ADA ramps that are coming up, that might be a nice opportunity to have a council member who is aware, even if you're not attending the meetings, to be the person that the city staff could debrief on, to include in, to keep you in the loop on some of these things. Same thing with emergency planning is something that's coming up, to have somebody that staff can go to just to let you know about, issues we're working on, such as improving the radio communication system, right, and some of the challenges there. And it's nice sometimes when you're dealing with these other organizations, they like seeing us, they're friendly to us, but they always want to know, is the council engaged or involved, or are they aware of what's happening here? And so I wouldn't say this is necessarily more meetings per se, but this is where a chance where we would loop some people in on some of these conversations. And I think we could identify some of the things. Economic development, SEDCOR for sure. Regional solutions could potentially be. But I think there's other things that may come out of this, or opportunities that come in the future that we haven't identified. And that's what I kind of like about some of these broader scopes, is trying to have some of that flexibility to allow council members to then step in some of these. So I think we could definitely work on doing this, like the city projects, master plans. We have a transportation master plan. You plan on bringing forward another master plan next year for the budget. So that's a pretty easy one to say. If we're looking about a needs assessment for City Hall, that would be another city project I think would associate. And just to be able to include people in the loop would be part of what the goal is. And if they can attend meetings or want to attend meetings, or if we think it's critical for somebody to be at the meeting, so we can try to schedule to have somebody there, because I think it changes the narrative quite a bit when a council member's in the room.
Yeah.
That's a long-winded answer. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah. For instance, we've got a new county sheriff, and it would be nice to kind of get a sense that the present sheriff comes to these meetings with the county on the second Tuesday of each month in the mornings. Be fun to just see. I go to them anyway, but somebody else might want to get to know this new person. Just a thought.
Mayor,
go ahead.
Sheriff Myers, he's not gone yet, right? He's on his way out.
The sheriff is retiring, what, in June or July?
Yeah, not yet.
The sheriff has put in his notice that he's going to resign as of July 1st.
Okay, that's what I thought. It wasn't.
He's made a recommendation of who the next person would be, but the commission has not even done a process yet to appoint somebody yet.
Okay. I have a question about these groups. I really like this flexibility that I see here. As a counselor, I would love to see outside of this resolution, maybe like a list of what you guys have envisioned that are currently groups or subjects that are under that umbrella, and maybe like the dates and times that they're currently meeting, that we can keep informed so that we're not missing out on it. Because I think it's great to have kind of like almost like a subject matter expert on the council for these different things, just so that when we get talking about this stuff, we can be like, hey, aren't you involved in that? Can you tell us a little bit about what you know?
Well, here's another one. This is another kind of a new thing. We've talked about it. There's some enthusiasm for it. These neighborhood councils, or a neighborhood council with people, different groups in the city that may not have much of a voice, and try to involve more of these groups. We've talked about it. There has been some enthusiasm for it. We haven't formed a neighborhood council, but it's something that could be under this advisory group heading. Just all kinds of really some neat things that are and could be and will be happening. There's just all kinds of neat possibilities. And of course, you folks are going to help make it happen. But that's just one that I can think of right now.
So, one other thing, Mr. Mayor, to kind of be in line with our work session that we had on Saturday. What was that called? Goal setting that we had. Thank you. Because we had identified that they like to have a little bit more clear direction from the council. I'm wondering if we have some type of consensus where we could say, does anyone else agree with me that it would be nice to have that informal list of things that they are kind of thinking of, that they could present to us and keep updated? Because I would like to ask the city staff if there is consensus, to kind of make that list if we do go ahead and approve these changes.
I think we can make a list of things that are, generally speaking, I mean, SEDCOR isn't something that meets all the time. They have a yearly dinner, so if you wanted to go to that, for instance. And then, as other things come up, to just put, to look at the person that would be related to that and be part of that, right? So we can definitely come up with, some of the ideas of what we currently have in terms of advisory groups, our, plans, our city projects, and some of those others. We wouldn't always have times that they're going to meet, or even formally, but here's the idea of some of the basic organizations that could fall under this, right?
Just a little bit more direction on what these ones entail.
Okay.
Yeah,
think so.
I would agree with that.
If we kind of like the overall idea of it, and then, we can get more specific.
Yeah, the goal wasn't tonight to have everybody sign up. It was just, do you like the concept, and where can we go from here?
Well, I kind of wanted them to sign up. Let's get on board.
Can I make a motion?
Yes, absolutely.
I want to make a motion to approve the...
Go ahead.
I wasn't finished with my question.
Oh, I
actually.
apologize.
It's okay.
No.
I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Ask a question.
Yeah, so as far as just outlining the details of what groups we would be associated with in these roles, when they meet, those are things that are pretty doable for this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as far as those of us who also have 40-hour-a-week jobs and have children and stuff like that, we can kind of make those necessary accommodations before committing to these specific specialties, which I'm sure we'll all take very seriously and want to be there for all these meetings so we can report back to you guys and make sure you have informed decisions and stuff like that.
What I guess I need to say too, I don't think, for instance, Lance would want you to come to every Parks Board meeting unless there was something specific at a Parks Board meeting that may be valuable to be there.
I disagree with you wholeheartedly. If I've got to be there, they got to be there.
I won't be on that one.
I'm just kidding.
With Lance's pugnaciousness beside the point here, I mean, I think that's kind of the idea of if there's something that would be important, and I think it's just a general, here's what's happening, and you can make some of those calls. I don't necessarily want staff to, but understand that, there wouldn't necessarily be, you're going to go to all of these meetings that we go to because there isn't stuff that is pertinent or productive. But I think for some of these conversations, it is nice to have, I can look at Rich here and put him on the spot, talking about emergency planning. There could be some things that would be nice to have a council member who's aware and has some of that. But when that would happen, how often that would occur, and what meetings you need to attend could vary, right?
Correct. There's in all of these things. There's a county emergency meeting that I go to every month. There's the public safety, the Staton Public Safety Committee that meets quarterly, and there's the county Public Safety Coordinating Council, and all of those that I attend, and all of those things, I attend those, and as a representative to that, as a public safety person, I would keep you informed on those items. And then if there was something pressing that I thought, hey, you probably really want to attend this meeting, this is what's coming up, then you could attend, or you could attend all of them if you wanted to, or you could let me tell you what's going on at them, or you could see the agendas on them and see, hey, I kind of like to go to that. But I don't, for me, I wouldn't foresee you attending all of them. It's more just to be informed of what's going on within the realm of public safety.
And who could be point of contacts on some of these issues? Like if
Correct.
an economic development opportunity presented itself, maybe that's where we bring in the council member. SEDCOR tells us about an opportunity, or the state tells us about an opportunity. That could be the initial step as we're going through that tire kicking stage, right? Of course, as it goes further along, we'd want to bring more people involved. But
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I got dibs on food cart tasting.
We can put that on there. That's city project.
That's Parks and Recreation.
All right. What would you folks like to do with this? I hope.
Okay, I would like to make a motion to approve the new liaison positions of the list.
And the list?
as presented.
I second that.
Okay, thank you. That list can be modified, less, more.
I think what we can do, Mr. Mayor, is just create a little more of a dynamic and send it off, and at the next, our upcoming council meeting, try to make the appointments based off of what they see and what they have interest in.
All right. Fine, thank you. Any other discussion? If there isn't any, then would all in favor of this
We need a
motion to
second.
approve the new liaison positions?
We still need a second, Mr. Mayor.
I'm sorry.
I seconded.
What?
I think you're good.
You're good.
Continue,
Apologize.
Mr. Mayor. You're good.
We're good.
Yes, sir.
We have a second.
What was that, almost
Alyssa
interruption?
didn't
We
hear.
didn't think it was a second, but we have a
Oh,
second.
there was a second, yeah.
Continue with your.
Yeah, I tried to do it right there, yeah. Would all in favor say aye, please?
Aye.
Thank you. And we'll flesh this out as we go. No staff commission reports, present comments from the public, anything? Presentation, comments from the public? Business from the city manager?
I have nothing, Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have nothing else this evening. Business from the council?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
You saw Jana get up then and receive a well-deserved award tonight, and I really want to give her props for the Bruise Bites function at the library. That's the fourth year, what is it now? Third year, and I've been in attendance in all those years, and it's been fantastic. So if you all haven't been there, Jordan was there. Great time,
It was
great
great.
solicitation of folks in the community for a great reason. Fantastic job, Jana.
Thanks for coming. Yes, thank you. It's good.
I like the art
I
show.
Mr. Mayor?
I was going to take Gus,
To the art show?
but I gave her the option of saying no, and so she did. So I went around brokenhearted for the evening, but I like the art show. And he's there in spirit anyway. Okay. Thank you. And thank you, Jenna. Yeah.
Mr. Mayor?
I shouldn't have given her the opportunity to say no, should I?
Nope.
Anyway, okay. Other things?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, question?
No, I missed this the last time that we were here. I was hoping to ask the city staff, with your guys' blessing, to look a little bit more into the Village Creek subdivision parking issue, and see if there's any brainstorming
Okay.
that we can do to kind of help figure out a way that they can have more parking. I had talked to Keith a little bit about possibly some options, but they're very rough. So I was hoping that maybe the staff could look at that one more time. What do you guys think?
Do we need to do anything to do it to make a motion?
I don't think it has to be a motion, just kind of like a head nod.
It's difficult, I think it's difficult to run into these situations that there does not seem to be a solution for. I think we're all basically, in our heart of hearts, we're all basically problem solvers. If we had Chris here this evening, he would have a solution. Let's do it, you know. But to run up against a situation where there just doesn't seem to be an equitable solution is, I don't know, it's disappointing, it's discouraging. I don't know what else to say about it, other than, if there's a solution, where is it?
That is my question.
I would say if they could take one more look at if there are any other parking, you're talking about not the taking down the signs or anything, but just additional parking.
Yeah, like looking at other streets, 3rd Avenue, things like that.
Well, we should, the big question is the happiness of a neighborhood. The parking thing is I guess that's what's
Entire
caused
issue.
the unhappiness, but, and it's not their fault, it's not ours. It's a situation that, it's a mistake that was made a long time ago, and how to fix it. So, somebody else want to jump in on this before I embarrass myself?
I think that if there's another option that's available for new parking, we should always be receptive to it from city staff. That's my own personal take on it, though.
Maybe take a look one more time and then
We can discuss it with the staff and talk about all the viable options.
Outside of the one already explored during the public hearing?
I mean, I think if we're going to touch on it again, we just might as well go over what's available and what solutions could be. It is going to be a pretty challenging situation.
Cool. Thank you.
Remember, folks, it's a public safety issue rather than, we just don't like your neighborhood. It isn't that at all. There's some really overriding concerns there. So, okay, we've got an assurance that the staff is going to look at it. Future agenda items are presentation by Thomas Hoag, Marion County Economic Development Coordinator, a public hearing on code amendments, a sidewalk program, downtown parking, and that's it. So, is there anything else this evening?
Let me add one to that, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
Just to keep you all informed, Ordinance 1019 will be coming back to us with some recommendations, so be prepared to tackle that one.
Okay. I've got a story, but we're going to adjourn first.